Hi everyone. Today I wanted to do a short video discussing the consequences of me trying to monetize my work as someone who discusses sex work more broadly, as a sex worker myself, as an activist, specifically someone who doesn't pass, which is to say the Protestant ethic is puritanical, but hypocritically so, in ways that treat you differently if you do pass versus if you don't. And if you do pass, you will basically be given relative access to different platforms where you normally shouldn't be allowed, and then let out through the back door. Whereas if you don't pass, you are basically kept at the gate. Before I conclude the video, like, share, and subscribe, by the way, if you liked it, and leave a comment. Any bit helps. You can also share my Patreon if you like. I have various other support links in the description of my video that you can go to. Even just sharing them helps. But if you have $1 a month, then you can do so, and that makes a big difference. However, as far as making something on Patreon or on YouTube in a video sort of response, where if you want me to respond to signified B-sides, 10 minutes of Goon World, where FT Signifier is basically giving a 10-minute sample of a larger Goon World episode 1 only on Nebula here. If you want me to respond to this 10 minutes of Goon World, if you leave and go to Patreon here, and if I get 5 subscribers, I will respond to this 10 minutes of Goon World. If I get 15 subscribers, I will subscribe to Nebula and react to the whole thing and make it a Patreon exclusive. But that's only if I get support. I can't just make content like that willy-nilly. It takes a lot of time. Even if I'm just sitting in front of a microphone recording, I have to edit things. I have to devote the time and energy it takes to record. And frankly, I need people's help to continue making content like this. And the 10-minute sample would be on YouTube. The longer response to Nebula would be on Patreon. But again, 5 subscribers to do the 10-minute sample, and then 15 subscribers on Patreon to subscribe to Nebula and watch the entire episode and then respond to it. I can do like a 3,000 word essay even, if I get the subscribers. So I just wanted to put that at the end. Maybe I'll put it at the start actually, but the point being is that that's a little bit of content that I can do on YouTube and on Patreon, despite the restrictions that are taking place. Until I make whatever I make next, thank you for watching, and until next time, stay safe out there, and happy Pride. So, keeping all of that in mind, I made the decision to monetize my work on Patreon, given that I don't think, according to what I discussed normally on YouTube, that I would be able to monetize my channel here. And I thought to myself, okay, if I can't do that, I should be able to make videos on Patreon. But I found out that even after removing all of what I considered to be the not safe for work content on my Patreon channel, and then asking Patreon, dear Patreon, I would like to make my channel accessible to everyone and not just be 18 and up, they told me that I violated certain rules according to them, glancing at what little there is left on my Patreon channel, specifically a cover of my book and this image here. The title of my book being Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion, or Gothic Communism, Liberating Sex Work Under Capitalism Through Iconoclastic Art. So, having done that, they responded to me saying, "This is from the Trust and Safety team at Patreon. We are contacting you because we noticed content on your page that looks like it should be marked as adult content. again, specifically this image and this image. This is a book cover of a book that isn't even on my Patreon account. It's just to say my book series is predominantly written, so I have a cover of my book to let people know what I'm talking about. And the trust and safety team at Patreon is letting me know that it looks like this image is content that, because it exists on my page at all, even if I'm just talking about something that isn't actually on my page, they think that my entire page should be marked as adult, 18 and up, essentially. And what that essentially translates to is I can't make videos. I can do audio, I can do images, but I can't make videos. So my initial announcement, if you go to my channel where I say supporting my work, and you can even see where here videos and voice work in 2026, I had actually made the announcement thinking I'm not going to run into any problems. I'll just take down all of the content on my page, literally just have this one announcement and a couple of other posts that are, again, of a similar variety. Here's an example of an old essay that I gave, and here's my book cover and my logo and my co-writer slash partner, Bay Ryan. So there isn't really anything on here that I think would merit my Patreon being listed as adult. But again, the trust and safety team at Patreon disagreed. I received another message as well. This is Patreon's trust and safety team. Thanks for reaching out. In order to recategorize your page to safe for all audiences, you'll need to remove all adult 18 plus works from your page. Per our community guidelines, this includes works that contain depictions of real human nudity that comply with Patreon's other guidelines, sexual activity or sexualized nudity in animated, illustrated, written, or other works involving non-real subjects. Non-visual, highly detailed depictions of sexual activity in written works or audio works, e.g. erotic literature or erotic ASMR. Depictions of clear kink and fetish. And it's worth noting that my book cover says contains academic, erotic, and triggering materials. But again, it's also worth noting that my book is not actually on Patreon. I'm just saying that I wrote my book elsewhere and it contains that stuff. But they think, or seem to think, that that constitutes as content on Patreon. Furthermore, even if you didn't have depictions of real human nudity or sexual activity, sexualized nudity, there's also the description of sexual activity in an educational format and depictions of clear kink and fetish. So even if we removed all of the visual nudity, even if you considered these images here to be nudity according to Patreon, and I took those down, I still would run into problems because most of my work, being a sex worker, being a sexologist, an educator about sex worker rights, I would still find myself with my back against the wall because most of my work discusses kink and fetish and sexual activity in politicized forms, in educational forms, but still clearly and obviously in ways that, according to Patreon, even talking about those things at all makes them adult content, makes them 18 and up, as opposed to, say, discussing about violence more broadly, discussing about guns and bombs and war and racism and genocide and various other things where other channels who don't talk about sex don't get policed nearly as hard. And that brings us back to the Protestant ethic. The Protestant ethic is much more comfortable talking about violence more broadly than it is about sexuality. Nothing is more policed than sex, because sex, above all else, is the one thing that the state needs to control more than anything else to survive. And there are various hypocrisies that go into that as well, which I want to look at next. So we've gone over the basic situation where I wanted to monetize my content and basically discuss what I'm up against, where even if I remove all of the nudity or things that they consider to be nudity, even though it's cropped, even though the person on my thing is still wearing clothes, they consider that to be nudity or the context of it. You'll know it when you see it, as a judge famously said. And keeping that in mind, if I remove all of that, just the content that I'm discussing is deemed pornographic in ways that involve a certain amount of hypocritical gatekeeping per the Protestant ethic. And there are two different things that I want to look at as far as that goes: the legal side and the reality of its execution in ways that demonstrate what happens if you pass versus if you don't pass. So, first and foremost, let's look at some of the legalese, the legislative side of things, which is, again, on paper and how it plays out in different ways, different gatekeeping ways. So, again, the message trust and safety team at Patreon, where they're looking to make the browsing experience safe and considerate for everyone, whereupon it's perfectly okay for essayists to have content discussing violence more broadly, including the use of weapons, the dropping of bombs, genocide, police brutality. You can have any number of physically violent things that are occurring and being discussed, and thus not meriting the adult content label. The adult content label, similar to film, is something R-rated versus X-rated, or in this case, safe for everyone, means that with a lot of YouTube channels, they can go and basically make whatever they want, except for discussing sexuality, because sexuality, removed from the bedroom vis-a-vis Foucault, and a history of sexuality, is seen as a threat. Sex is something that is relegated to the bedroom to be funneled into the nuclear model, and everything around that operates canonically in service to it. So, keeping that in mind, the trust and safety team is working hard to keep the browsing experience safe and considerate for everyone by removing anything or marking anything that might, in their eyes, be deemed not advertiser friendly, which is a nice, polite way of saying they're pimping different things. And keeping that in mind, the trust and safety team mirrors legal language comparable to different things that I've examined and discussed before regarding prohibition and genocide occurring side by side. Persephone discusses current attacks on free speech, Texas versus sex work, Medicaid theft and abuse, Planned Parenthood, and different ways to fight back. But essentially, the hypocritical, puritanical aspects of the Protestant ethic play out in language conducive to genocide, which targets sex workers and trans people side by side. First, you have the Free Speech Coalition Incorporated et al. Versus Paxton Attorney General of Texas, where they basically defeated Free Speech Coalition by passing something that said, help, you're distributing pornography to people online who are under the age of 18. Therefore, everyone must verify their age. This doesn't protect children or women or any other vulnerable party. Instead, what it does is it sets up an argument that those groups are somehow being affected by someone the state can attack. And it does so through prohibition as silencing different groups by enacting different things that serve as gatekeeping mechanisms, as roadblocks for them to meet their basic material needs, which is to say, do sex work in ways that aren't pushed under the table. relegated to the nadir of society. It is a form of criminalization. So this is one instance of that. Another example of that, mind you, is House Bill number 4938, introduced in Michigan. The state of Michigan is passing a specific bill called the Anticorruption of Public Morals Act, which targets different things that have to do with pornography or things deemed as pornographic or a threat to the public, specifically trans people. So again, the same kind of puritanical language here, trust and safety at Patreon, or the state of Texas versus Free Speech Coalition and the distribution of pornographic material as a form of free speech, where those rights are taken away, presumably in the defense of the safety of women, children, those under the age of 18, or those infantilized accordingly, because women's rights more broadly, regardless of their age, are also being slowly stripped away. But it's happening faster and faster under fascism. So it happened in Texas. They're trying to pass that bill here in Michigan, where I live, and they're all doing it under a false flag. Trust and safety, making the browsing experience safe and considerate for everyone, while criminalizing large swaths of people who do sex work to survive, and also pointing the finger at trans people more broadly, regardless if they're sex workers or not. The whole point of this House bill is to remove trans people from existence by saying that we are inherently pornographic according to the Anti-Corruption of Public Morals Act. We are an affront to the public in ways that violate the morals of society more broadly simply by existing. We are, for all intents and purposes, anathema. And this is essentially the trans question playing out in real time alongside the Puritan ethic as incurred by the trust and safety team at Patreon and by extension, the Supreme Court of the United States. This happened back in October 2024, or it says October term 2024. The argument actually occurred January 15th, 2025, decided June 27th, 2025. But nearly a year ago now, this was passed. So in Texas, if you want to access pornography, you at the very least need a VPN. So there are different services that can counteract this, but they're effectively a band-aid to a large gaping wound that was caused by a legislative action that was passed by the state government. And these bills, actions, what have you, within state governments are a response to the federal government targeting trans people and pornography more broadly as a part of trans genocide. Sex work, trans genocide, and other domestic issues are the way the state cracks down on worker rights at home to, as I argue, further genocide abroad. Genocide and prohibition go hand in hand, and trans genocide at home operates alongside Palestinian genocide overseas. They're two sides of the same coin, and they affect people in the same basic way, which is to take away their rights and brutalize them accordingly through the state, through police violence. And people can talk about that all they want, as long as apparently you don't have any butts in the image. God forbid there's a butt with clothes on it. Like this image, YouTube is okay with for now, but Patreon said, oh no, can't have that. And it's all decided by AI, and those algorithms are programmed according to the legislative language I just went over. So this is the legislative side of things. Next, I want to go over the hypocritical element of its execution on a day-to-day basis. So the hypocritical side of things, we need only look at the idea of passing. Now, passing doesn't have to be gender nonconforming. It can mean literally just those who adhere to certain beauty standards. So you can be cisgender and pass, or you can be trans and pass. And conversely, you can be gender nonconforming, pass, don't pass. Don't pass, go, don't collect $200. Monopoly being a critique or parody of capitalism that illustrates a ludological perspective through the act of playing a game, how capital plays out. It's literally zero sum. But through that execution, during the Protestant ethic as puritanical, which has various laws that you'll notice are subjective, because at the end of the day, the language is very broad. It talks about the protection of women and children through the protection of morals against corruption, and a common corrupting force is the whore. But even within that, there are various contradictions and paradoxes insofar as whores can take on different qualities. You can have someone such as myself, who's a sex worker, and a radical who doesn't pass, meaning I not only don't adhere to conventional standards and binaries, but I also am gate-kept. Whereas other people who might not seem like they would be allowed in because of their obviously sexual nature are allowed because it panders to specific canonical interests, namely that of white straight women, for instance, even if they're not actually white or straight. In the case of this person here, 6 million views. And this person is white, obviously, a white blonde woman who is able to present themselves in a pretty sexual way. Not so different from what I have here, honestly. And there are other examples still. This person cooking up magic in the enchanted forest, 14 million views. Look at that nipple poke. And again, I'm not judging them puritanically, but just acknowledging that this would seem to be, according to the people who are protecting others from me, to violate various standards that are applied differently depending on who you are. And if you are essentially of that trad wife conventional sort of beauty standard variety, then you are allowed through the door. YouTube bunnies get in. And when they get in, they're allowed to do what they do. And furthermore, if you watch any of these, they often have links where you can click on something. So this person is literally walking out of the room.
Okay, so
I'm not judging them for the work that they're doing, just acknowledging that YouTube is letting this kind of thing happen in a way where a double standard is present hypocritically within their own territory that they're policing. The policing of something through a Puritan ethic is hypocritical in service to sex as something that they can pimp. They let certain people in and they can do their work. If you click on this link, adult content warning. This content is intended for adults only. This takes you to an OnlyFans page. So, yeah, this is very obviously hypocritical insofar as, oh, the trust and safety team at Patreon, well, YouTube has a similar policy where advertiser friendly content is allowed. Something like this, I would imagine, isn't monetized, but they can still be let in to work their trade, which is to say, oh, trust, I'm just a librarian. Nothing to see here, folks. Clean in the streets and they're a freak in the sheets. So this kind of thing is relegated to a bedroom, but it exists in a public space. And I'm sure that this person perhaps does study biology at UIC. That's totally valid. But if you click on that video and you go to their page and you click on this link, wow, wouldn't you know it? They're an OnlyFans worker. They're a sex worker. And this isn't to expose them, but merely comment on the reality that sex work is something that is done under the territory and bailiwick of those who enforce these rules hypocritically. So if you're someone who passes, if you're someone who's cis, often women, white women in particular, bunnies on YouTube are allowed to go in and do their work as sex workers as long as they appear a particular way. There are different double standards. And there are others as well, where again, there's all kinds of different examples of that. And you have a lot of white women in particular who make this kind of content. It could be booties out, legs out, nips out, this yoga pose, which is talking about Kegels. Churning butter is a phallic metaphor, and various other things. It's basically cottagecore thirst trap. And Mary or Ghost Starfire, again, get it, girl. If you can get that kind of thing, that's fine. Get that bag. But I'm just acknowledging the hypocrisy of the Puritan ethic being enforced while all of these logistic legal issues are at play. And certain people will basically be allowed in through the front under the disguise of making certain content. And then there's backdoor access to the very things that they describe as protecting other people from, to keep the browsing experience safe and considerate for everyone, and yet, booty out, junk up front and center, and I don't mind that kind of stuff personally, but as a sex worker who's basically being denied the ability to make the kind of content that I want to make because it's apparently not safe for the public, well, what about all these people, and the content that they make? So that's just the reality of what I face is, as someone who doesn't pass, as someone who is a sex worker, a sexologist, an activist, I'm being shoved off into the corner somewhere where I can't even do video on Patreon. I can do voice work, but I can't. I see all of these other people drawing hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views in these short little videos. I can't compete with. All of the eyeballs are on that. And it's all happening in a very hypocritical way that leads to various double standards being enforced by the people who own the platform. I'm not going to blame these people specifically because they're not the ones who are making and enforcing the rules. They're just literally being sex workers in a situation where they found a way in and are able to do what they do. But that way in operates according to various double standards that I, as a gender nonconforming person, a trans person, I don't pass. And barring, some kind of obscene windfall where I suddenly have access to lots of money and I could have bottom surgery and various other things to help make me pass, that's not ultimately my goal. My goal as someone who doesn't have a lot of money is to make enough money to be able to talk about the stuff that I talk about, including prohibition and genocide, including my book series and the people that work with me on said book series, most of whom don't pass either, most of whom wouldn't be able to make content like this. It's just not something that's generally allowed unless you fall into a specific category, which unto itself operates through language, legal language that is already very broad and vague and arbitrarily enforced through these double standards, but also the algorithm, which is an invisible machine that basically decides what gets views and what doesn't get views. And all of this is getting views. But there are, again, double standards at play, which basically have different situations. Say during World War II, you could have a Parisian whore who would be white-skinned of a specific class character during World War II, and they would be treated very differently than someone being pimped out in a concentration camp, whether that person was Jewish, a person of color, or gay. Lots of people went to the concentration camps, and they would be treated very differently mid-genocide versus someone who was a whore in Paris. So there's a lot of different factors at play, and what was true before is also true now. And there's plenty of different examples that I talk about. I've talked about repeatedly in the work that I do, such as in this piece, raising awareness regarding Bad Empanada and his fascist behaviors and Marxist-Leninism versus anarcho-communism being something that contains largely me defending myself from fascist people, but also fascism more broadly targeting my friends that I want to talk about and make videos about, and I can't even do that on Patreon. And it's something that I've struggled with for a long time. And I have my blog, and my blog is the horror blog about metal, video games, and sex. And I also, incidentally, have my website. And my website and my blog are places where I talk about these kinds of things. But I'd like to have some way of monetizing it because my website and my blog aren't monetized. They're nonprofit, and they're a place where I post the work of myself and other people, predominantly gender nonconforming sex workers, to be able to have a place where they can share their work, where they can be seen, where they can be heard. That includes just promoting their pages. It includes promoting their rates, reviewing them, interviewing them. There's a lot of different things that I do, but I would like to be able to monetize all of that. And I find myself repeatedly facing barriers where I have been censored. And that censorship is something that is only continuing to mount. It seems like once upon a time, you could do videos and have an 18 plus account on Patreon or not be restricted nearly to the same degree. And these kinds of restrictions are only continuing to crop up as time goes on. So again, this is just fresh on the heels of my Patreon announcement and getting back into video and voice work. I suddenly realized that any video work that I do is predominantly going to be on YouTube because Patreon literally doesn't allow it. Regardless if I was trying to be more puritanical and more puritanical in the sense of, okay, I won't have a lot of images of sexuality, but maybe I can at least talk about it in an educational way. Nope, can't do that. So anything that goes on the Patreon is 18 plus, regardless of how explicit it actually is, regardless of how educational it is. It's just all or nothing. And that's just the reality of sex workers. It's the reality faced by these people as well when they make their content. They have just enough where they're let in through the front door, and then they give you backdoor access to different content that they create that isn't advertiser friendly. So sex worker is going to sex work, and that's totally fine. I just wanted to have this video where I talk about the hypocrisies of the owner class, the nation state, and state governments, federal governments, but also corporations like YouTube or Patreon, where sex workers are policed and controlled all the time, but bring in huge amounts of money. And that can be through whores, sex workers more broadly, but also care work and unpaid work, women's work more broadly, which includes whores. It's literally the world's oldest profession. And it's something that continues to operate and exist under capital presently.